14 Navy airmen vanished without a trace on December 5, 1945. But what happened next would prove that whatever force claimed them was just getting started, and the rescuers themselves were about to become the next victims. Flight 19 wasn't supposed to be anything more than navigation problem number 1, a routine navigational training flight with Lieutenant Charles C. Taylor acting as the flight's leader. Taylor was a seasoned naval aviator with some 2,500 flying hours and multiple World War II combat tours in the Pacific. These weren't rookie pilots stumbling through their first solo missions. These were battle-tested veterans flying state-of-the-art TBM Avenger torpedo bombers, aircraft so reliable they'd helped win the war in the Pacific just months earlier. The mission was textbook simple. Fly to the east from the Florida coast. Conduct bombing runs at a place called Hens and Chickens Shoals. Turn north, then proceed over Grand Bahama. The weather was fair, and the planes were well maintained. What could possibly go wrong in the crystal clear skies above the Bahamas? But at around 1600 hours, something did go wrong. Something so inexplicable that it would birth one of the most enduring mysteries in maritime history. About 90 minutes after takeoff, radio transmissions from Taylor suggested he was confused about his position. The official account suggests Lieutenant Taylor mistook his location, believing he was flying over the Florida Keys and the Gulf of Mexico. This wasn't just minor navigation confusion. This was a decorated combat veteran, a man who had navigated bombing runs over Japanese-held islands, suddenly unable to determine where he was in familiar waters just off the Florida coast. The radio transmissions that followed would chill anyone who heard them. Lieutenant Taylor began to express uncertainty about their location. His radio messages to control became increasingly disoriented. But it wasn't just Taylor who was lost. The other pilots, relying on Taylor's leadership, were being led deeper into what would become known as the most dangerous stretch of water on Earth. As the afternoon wore on, the weather and sea conditions got worse, and their situation became more desperate. These weren't the voices of pilots dealing with routine mechanical failure or bad weather. These were the voices of men confronting something beyond their training, beyond their experience, beyond their understanding. Over the next 3 hours, Lieutenant Taylor mistakenly led Flight 19 far out to sea, where the planes apparently ran out of fuel and crashed. But apparently is the key word here, because despite extensive search efforts, no confirmed trace of the planes or the 14 pilots and aircrewmen aboard has ever been found. Not a single piece of debris, not even an oil slick. What happened in those cursed waters that December afternoon was just the beginning, because within hours, 13 more men would join them in the Triangle's growing collection of souls, and the pattern of impossible disappearances that continues to this day was about to reveal itself in the most terrifying way imaginable. If these chilling mysteries have left you hungry for more dark secrets and unexplained phenomena, subscribe to Dark Dimensions X and hit that bell icon, because we're just getting started uncovering the most haunting stories that science and history tried to bury forever. The explosion that lit up the sky at exactly 7:27 p.m. would prove that death itself had an appointment in the Bermuda Triangle that night, and 13 rescuers were about to discover that some mysteries don't want to be solved. The Martin PBM-5 Mariner flying boat known as Training 49 had been dispatched from Naval Air Station Banana River as part of the largest search and rescue operation in Navy history. This wasn't just any rescue plane. The PBM Mariner was nicknamed the Flying Boat and was one of the most reliable aircraft in the Navy's fleet. Built to withstand the harshest conditions of World War II, these planes had successfully completed countless rescue missions across the Pacific. If any aircraft could brave whatever had claimed Flight 19, it should have been this one. Lieutenant Commander Robert F. Cox was monitoring radio transmissions from his own aircraft when he first heard Flight 19's distress calls. What he witnessed through his radio would haunt him for the rest of his life. The voices of experienced pilots, men he knew personally, growing more desperate by the hour. Cox attempted to guide them home, serving as a radio relay between Flight 19 and ground control. But the compass readings the pilots were giving made no sense. They were reporting positions that should have been impossible given their fuel consumption and flight time. As darkness fell, the massive search operation swung into full gear. The Navy deployed everything they had: destroyers, Coast Guard cutters, submarines, and multiple aircraft squadrons. Nearly 300 boats and planes would eventually join the search, covering over 250,000 square miles of ocean, an area larger than the entire state of Texas. It was a search operation so vast that it stretched from the Bahamas to the Gulf of Mexico. But then came the explosion that witnesses would never forget. At exactly 7:27 p.m., multiple ships and aircraft reported seeing a massive fireball in the sky, followed by what appeared to be burning debris falling into the ocean. The blast was so intense that it could be seen from miles away, lighting up the darkening Atlantic like a second sunset. A merchant ship, the SS Gaines Mills, immediately rushed to the location of the explosion. Expecting to find survivors, or at least wreckage from the PBM Mariner, they found nothing. Not a single piece of debris, not a life jacket, not even an oil slick. The ocean had swallowed 13 more men, as completely and mysteriously as it had consumed Flight 19 hours earlier. The official report would later attribute the loss of the PBM search aircraft to an explosion in midair while searching for Flight 19. But that clinical explanation couldn't account for the impossible. How does a massive aircraft, weighing over 35,000 pounds when fully loaded, explode in midair and leave absolutely no trace? The PBM Mariner was designed to handle emergencies. It could land on water. Its crew was trained for survival at sea. Even if the plane had suffered a catastrophic explosion, there should have been something. Life rafts, debris, bodies. The ocean doesn't simply erase a 79-foot wingspan aircraft and 13 human beings without leaving a single trace. By the end of that blood-soaked December day, 27 men had been erased from existence in the same stretch of water. But this was only the beginning of a pattern so disturbing, so impossible, that it would stretch back decades and forward into our darkest nightmares. What if I told you that 27 years before, Flight 19 vanished, 309 souls aboard the largest warship in the U.S. Navy simply ceased to exist, and their disappearance would prove that the Triangle's hunger for human life began long before anyone knew its name. It was March 4th, 1918, and World War I raged across the Atlantic. The USS Cyclops, named for the fierce one-eyed giants of Greek mythology, was a beast of a ship. 540 feet long and 65 feet wide, the largest collier in the United States Navy. But on this voyage from Barbados to Baltimore, something was terribly wrong, even before she entered the Triangle's cursed waters. Captain George W. Worley had reported that the starboard engine had a cracked cylinder and was not operative. The ship was dangerously overloaded with tons and tons of dense manganese ore, used in steelmaking, carrying 10,800 long tons when her maximum safe capacity was only 8,000 tons. Any reasonable captain would have postponed the journey, but Worley was determined to deliver the ore that was desperately needed for the war effort. The last known location of the Cyclops was an unplanned stop made at Barbados on March 3rd, with 1,800 nautical miles to go on a 4,844 nautical mile journey. What happened during that unscheduled stop? Why did Worley feel compelled to make an emergency port call when he was already behind schedule? The official records are mysteriously sparse, but eyewitnesses in Barbados reported seeing crew members acting strangely nervous, as if they feared what lay ahead in the open ocean. When the Cyclops departed Barbados on March 4, 1918, she sailed directly into the heart of what we now know as the Bermuda Triangle. The loss of the ship and 309 crew and passengers without a trace occurred sometime after March 4, 1918. During World War I, she was initially thought to have been captured or sunk by a German raider or submarine because she was carrying 10,800 long tons of manganese ore needed for steel production. What makes the disappearance of the USS Cyclops so chilling isn't just its size or the number of lives lost. It remains the single largest non-combat loss of life in U.S. naval history. It's the absolute completeness of the vanishing. Numerous ships sailed to locate the collier, as she was thought to have been sunk by a German submarine. Her wreck has never been found, and the cause of her loss remains unknown. A ship that massive doesn't simply disappear. At 540 feet long with a cargo holding capacity of 12,500 tons, the Cyclops was larger than many buildings. If she had suffered a catastrophic explosion, broken apart in rough seas, or been torpedoed by German U-boats, there would have been debris fields stretching for miles. Lifeboats, cargo, bodies, oil slicks. Something should have survived to tell the tale. But the ocean kept its secrets. There was not a single distress call. No debris was ever found. French and American vessels searched trade routes between the two ports, but found no trace. The USS Cyclops had become the first major vessel to be completely devoured by the Bermuda Triangle. But she wouldn't be the last, and what happened next would prove that the Triangle's appetite was far from satisfied, with two identical aircraft about to meet the exact same impossible fate. Two identical passenger aircraft flying Atlantic routes about a year apart both vanished without a trace. But the mathematical impossibility of this coincidence pales in comparison to what science has finally discovered lurking beneath the Triangle's waters. January 30th, 1948. The British South American Airways Avro Tutor 4, named Star Tiger, was completing the final leg of a journey that had already pushed both aircraft and crew to their limits. The flight from London had been plagued with mechanical problems from the start. A faulty cabin heater that left passengers shivering in the frigid Atlantic air, and compass issues that made navigation treacherous. But Captain Brian W. McMillan was determined to reach Bermuda, just 300 miles away. 25 passengers and 6 crew members were aboard when Star Tiger took off from Santa Maria in the Azores for what should have been a routine 12-hour flight to Bermuda. These weren't inexperienced travelers. Many were seasoned businessmen and government officials who regularly flew the Atlantic routes. They had survived the mechanical problems of the earlier legs of the journey. Bermuda was so close they could almost taste the warm Caribbean air. At 3:15 a.m. on January 30th, radio operator Robert Tuck sent his final position report to Bermuda Radio Control. The message was routine, professional, betraying no hint of distress or concern. Star Tiger was exactly where she should be, flying at the correct altitude, maintaining proper airspeed. The estimated time of arrival at Kindley Field was 5 a.m. Everything was proceeding normally, but 5 a.m. came and went. Star Tiger never arrived. 26 aircraft flew 882 hours in total during the 5-day search operation, covering over 250,000 square miles of ocean. The search was massive, involving U.S. Air Force personnel, Coast Guard vessels, and civilian aircraft. But they found nothing. Not a single piece of debris, not an oil slick, not a life jacket. Star Tiger and her 31 souls had simply ceased to exist. But the triangle wasn't finished with British South American Airways. Almost exactly 1 year later, on January 17, 1949, another BSAA passenger plane called Star Ariel departed Bermuda bound for Kingston, Jamaica. Star Ariel was also an Avro Tudor 4, identical to her vanished sister ship. The weather conditions were perfect. Clear skies, calm seas, excellent visibility. Unlike Star Tiger's troubled journey, Star Ariel had no mechanical problems, no weather issues, no reasons for concern. Captain John Clutha McPhee, a former Royal New Zealand Air Force pilot, contacted Kingston Radio about an hour into the flight with a routine position report. I departed from Kindley Field at 8:41 a.m. hours. My ETA at Kingston, 2:10 p.m. hours. I am flying in good visibility at 18,000 feet. Those would be the last words anyone would ever hear from Star Ariel. 7 crew members and 13 passengers vanished as completely as if they had never existed. 2 identical aircraft, 2 experienced crews, 2 routine flights, 2 complete disappearances within the same cursed triangle of water. The odds of such identical disasters occurring by pure chance were astronomical. But what scientists have discovered about the forces lurking beneath these waters will change everything you thought you knew about the impossible. The truth about the Bermuda Triangle's disappearances has finally been revealed. But what science discovered beneath those cursed waters is more terrifying than any supernatural explanation ever imagined. Deep beneath the Caribbean's crystalline waters lies a graveyard of methane hydrate deposits, ancient formations of frozen gas that have been building for millennia. When geological shifts or underwater seismic activity disturb these deposits, massive methane gas bubbles can erupt from the seafloor with explosive force. The gas surges up and erupts on the surface without warning, and if a ship were in the area of the blowout, the water beneath it would suddenly become much less dense, causing the vessel to sink while sediment quickly covers it as it settles onto the seafloor. But here's what makes these methane eruptions so devastating. When methane gas bubbles rise to the surface, they reduce the density of water, making it less buoyant for ships. They also reduce the air density, making it harder for planes to fly. Furthermore, methane gas is highly flammable and explosive, so it could ignite from a spark. In seconds, an aircraft flying through a methane cloud could lose lift and catch fire simultaneously, plummeting into waters that would immediately swallow any debris. This explains the complete disappearances. Ships don't have time to send distress signals before they're consumed by methane-depleted waters. Aircraft experience catastrophic engine failure and fire so rapidly that pilots can't even comprehend what's happening, let alone radio for help. The sediment-rich waters of the triangle mean that wreckage is buried almost instantly beneath tons of Caribbean seafloor debris. Scientists have also discovered that the area has natural magnetic variations in relation to the magnetic poles, and mariners usually accustomed to accounting for discrepancies in their compass. Readings may make mistakes when very near to the agonic line that lead them astray. These magnetic anomalies, combined with the triangle's notoriously unpredictable weather patterns, create a perfect storm of navigational hazards. But here's the twist that challenges everything. Lloyd's of London determined that large numbers of ships had not sunk there and does not charge higher rates for passing through this area. The number of supposed disappearances is relatively insignificant considering the number of ships and aircraft that pass through the region regularly. Statistical analysis reveals that the mystery of the Bermuda Triangle was a myth perpetuated by selective reporting and a lack of statistical analysis. So, which truth do we believe? The scientific explanations that account for every mysterious detail, or the cold statistics that suggest the triangle is no more dangerous than any other stretch of ocean. Perhaps the real mystery of the Bermuda Triangle isn't what happens to the ships and planes that disappear. It's why we need to believe in the impossible. In a world where science can explain methane eruptions and magnetic anomalies, why do we still crave the supernatural? Why do we choose to focus on the dramatic disappearances while ignoring the thousands of safe passages? The Bermuda Triangle's greatest deception wasn't the disappearances themselves. It was convincing us that the impossible was more believable than the terrifying reality of nature's most deadly trap, where ships and planes don't vanish into other dimensions, but fall victim to forces so violent and sudden that they leave no survivors to tell their tale.